Hi, I'm Bob Tabor with LearnVisualStudio.net. In this lesson, we're going to search for Flickr photos that are near the geo-coordinate position as determined by our phone. So many of the most popular phone apps have some interaction with web-based services. So the app allows users to get at their own data that they've stored in the cloud, marketing term, or they provide access to data in order to make it available in some fresh new way. As developers, we can access the web-based services programmatically if they expose a web API. And a web API is usually just an HTTP-based method call. So the URL includes the input parameters of the method call, and then the web API will return data back in some standard format. Nowadays, that's usually XML or JSON, the JavaScript object notation. And Flickr is a great example of a web service that we can leverage in our apps. They have a vast amount of image data that we can search for via their web-based API. All we need to do is call one of their methods and then parse through all of the data that they return to us. So our game plan in this lesson is, first of all, to do a little investigation into the Flickr API to see how we can leverage it in our app. Then we're going to get set up with Flickr so that we can make calls to their API and get some examples of how to call the method that we want to utilize and then look at the data that we would expect back from Flickr. And then we're going to write code in our app to actually do that, to make the calls to the Flickr API. And then when we get data back from our call to the Flickr API, we want to figure out how to parse that data and actually obtain a picture that we can then display in our app. That's a great first step. And so this is a very long lesson, this and the lesson after that, because it's crucial. It serves as a proof of concept that our idea will actually work. We're going to see how all the pieces come together, and then the rest of this series will merely be adding improvements and refinements to what we've done in this lesson. All right, so as you can see, I've already navigated to flickr.com/services/API. This is their API documentation for what they call the App Garden. Now, the first thing you're going to need to do is get a Yahoo login, and I already have one, so I'm just going to log in here. And now that I've logged in and I have a developer account set up, and I'm going to leave you to figure that out because this will change often, I'm sure, from the time I record this to the time that you watch this. The next thing that you're going to need is you're going to need an API key. And so most companies that do expose APIs over the web, they want to ensure that developers are complying with their terms of service, or they want to track the usage by app to determine how their apps are or their APIs are actually being leveraged. And I suppose even in extreme cases, the company might want to shut down an app that's abusing their service. So this is why most of them require a unique identification for the developer and the app through the use of an API key, and Flickr is no different here. So to get an API key for our app, you want to find the API key link somewhere on this page. It happens to be in my version of the page under this little gray area right here. And what we want to do is you'll see a list of all of the API keys that were granted for your apps. And so you're going to need to use a different API key for each app that you intend to use with Flickr's API. Now, ultimately, you're going to want to create your first one using this Get Another Key button. And it's going to ask you whether this is a commercial or non-commercial concern. We're going to apply for a non-commercial key for now, but in the future, if we were to use this for a commercial app or something along those lines, then we would obviously need to select the other option there. All right, so what is the name of our app? It's called Around Me. And what are you building? I'm just going to tell them I'm building a simple app to learn more about Windows Phone 8 development using the Flickr API and the phone's GPS to find photos near where the user is currently standing. Hope I got that spelled all right. I will go ahead and agree blindly to these terms and conditions and click the Submit button. And you'll see that you have your very own new shiny API key and a secret. And I'm probably not supposed to legally reveal these here. However, I'm probably going to delete these keys and the secret immediately after this series of lessons. So go ahead and try and use it if you want. It's not going to work for you. But let's go back to the API documentation page. And here you're going to see a list kind of throughout here on the right-hand side of all of the web callable APIs that are available on Flickr. And you can literally perform any conceivable operation using Flickr as the back-end storage and the processor for your photos, and you can create new applications that mash up Flickr's functionality with some of your own functionality like we're going to do. And so what we want to do is combine Flickr's search capability for their photos that were taken geographically in the same place as the user of our app. So what we want to do is we want to look for the flickr.photos.search API, and I see it right here as I scroll through. And I'm going to go ahead and click that to learn more about that particular method, that particular API. So how do we call it? What options can we send along to specify the geolocation that we want to search for, and so on? And you can see here it gives you a list of all possible arguments that are passable into the API, and then we can also see what we would expect back from the call, and finally error codes that might pop up and the reason for them. Furthermore, we see this API Explorer, which I found extremely helpful, and it gives us a way to just experiment and see, for example, let's take a look at search text that we want to search for. So observatory, we're going to look for the latitude and the longitude. You'll notice that all of these are optional. So we can just send in a bare minimum search and get something back potentially. We don't have to use all of these. We just will select the ones that we want to send along and what their values are. So I think in our case, I don't remember exactly, but it was 41.8988. I'll just make something up, and negative 87.6123. I think I'm just making that up. The radius, and you can see if we hover over, we get some explanation about what these are. The radius and what the radius units are. By default, they're kilometers. However, we can also choose miles. So let's just say within a radius of 10 kilometers. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and select sign call with no user token. So we're not using somebody else's user token. We're just going to use our own API key in the call. And I'm going to go ahead and click the output to be JSON, because that's what I think I ultimately want to work with. We've already worked with Newtonsoft's JSON library. I think we can utilize that again in this lesson in order to work with the JSON that comes back from Flickr, parse through it, or actually I've got a plan that we can use to take all the JSON data we get back and just automatically dehydrate it into instances of classes. We're going to do that next. And then we'll be able to use it in our app. So I prefer JSON. Finally, I'm going to click the call method button here at the bottom. And what it will do, if we scroll down, is it'll give us a sample of the JSON that we would expect to get back. And then also it would give us an example of the API call that we could expect to make. And it substitutes in, for example, our API key and so on. And so what we'll do is we'll construct this URL in C# code, substituting in like the search text, the latitude, the longitude, and things, and the API key and things of that nature. All right. So let's go ahead and move on now. We've got a sense of what we're going to do here with Flickr. Now let's set up our project to actually make those calls. So back in my Visual Studio project, I need to prepare for making my first call into the Flickr API. I'll want to brand the app by changing simple things like the name of the app, the page titles, and things of that nature. And for this app, you know, we've already talked about localization and things like that before. I'm not going to go through any of that. I'm just going to hard code these values. So for example, here in the text block, we'll change this to around me, and the page name will be pictures near ... like that. All right, and then the next thing that I want to do is I want to go down to the content panel and set it up. And I'm going to create 3 rows. The first row will be for a little text block that I'm going to display our current GPS location. So first of all, let me create a series of grid.row definitions. And we'll create our first row definition with a height of 50. Because again, I just want a little text block there that I'm going to remove later. And I have another row definition that I'm going to set to a height of 200. And this will contain our map control as we have it right now. And then finally, I'm going to create a row definition for the image that we get back from our call to the Flickr API. Okay, and so now what we'll do is I'm going to start off by adding a text block, and we'll go ahead and give it a programmatic name because I plan on calling this from C#. So result text block, and I'll set it in grid.row equals 0. I think I changed my mind. I'm going to put the image in the second row. So we're going to create an image control, and I'm going to give it a name as well. We'll just call this Flickr image, and we'll get rid of this eventually, but I just want to make one quick call to see if I can get data. And after I can prove that I can, then we'll move to another page where we'll have the entire search results, not just one photo. And I'm going to use this stretch attribute to say I want it uniform to fill. Don't stretch the image, just fit as much you can in that area that you've got. And if you can't get it all in there, don't stress about it. And then we'll set our map then to grid.row, give it the rest too. So it'll have the largest area at the bottom. Okay? So again, my goal is to populate this image control with a single image. And later on, we're going to remove all this. I'll add a search results page that can display all the results. But for now, I just want to hack something together to figure out how to call into the Flickr API programmatically and get results, and then we can go there and I'll make it work correctly later on. Okay. So in order to make this happen, I'm going to go to my mainpage.xaml.cs, and I want to add, actually I'm going to change the update map method. So let me just comment out this set view here, and I'm going to add a little more code. And so we're going to set the aroundme.center, aroundmemap.center equal to the GPS chord center, and the aroundmemap.zoom level equals 15. And you might ask, well, how is that different than this? It's not. I just felt like making a different type of call there. Result text block dot text equals string dot format 0 and 1. So we want to just display the current latitude and longitude just to make sure we're getting those values, and I want to see it on screen. So around me map dot center dot latitude and around me map dot center dot longitude, and this will help me determine if I do run into any problems where the problem is at. If I don't get any latitude and longitude, I know that's the problem. And then finally, now that I have latitude and longitude, I am ready to make my first call into Flickr. Now, how am I going to make a call to a web service through HTTP, just like any other website? How am I going to make that call and then retrieve back results? Well, I'm going to need a special class that will allow me to do that, and I need something called an HTTP client. And I can find an HTTP client at suitable for the Windows Phone at nuget.org/packages/microsoft.net.http. And you can see the description here. This package provides a programming interface for modern HTTP applications on a bunch of platforms, not the least of which is Windows Phone 8. This package includes HTTP client for sending requests over HTTP, as well as HTTP request message and response message. So request and response messages for processing HTTP messages. Great. Okay, so how am I going to install it? I'm going to open up the Package Manager console and type in this command. Well, what in the world is the Package Manager console? It's NuGet. It's just a command line version of NuGet. Some people think it's faster than using the dialog that we've been using up to this point. So we're gonna see if that's true. I'm gonna copy this, and then I'm going to go to Visual Studio and go to the Tools menu, and then the Library Package Manager, and select the Package Manager console. This will pop open the Package Manager console, and I'm merely going to Control V to paste in the install-package microsoft.net.http command and hit return on my keyboard. And I get a series of messages about what it is attempting to do to my project, to update this, to add that, and things of that nature. And now if I look in the references, you can see that I have a system.net.http, system.net.http.extension, system.net.http.primitives. These are all added to my package using NuGet via the Package Manager console. Okay, very cool. Just two ways to do the exact same thing. All right, so we want to now add our HTTP client. And so we don't see that. We're going to have to add a using statement to system.net.http. Great. HTTP client equals new HTTP client. Awesome. And now what I want to do is I'm going to go back to this Flickr URL that it gave me here, and I'm just going to copy this whole thing out and use this as a template. So Control C to copy it, and then I'm just going to paste it in right here. Control V to paste it in. And what I'm going to do is construct a URL, so string URL equals, and I'm going to paste that in there. And I'm going to substitute in those things that I know I want to change about this. And I'm going to put this on multiple lines. So I'm going to use a bunch of plus characters pretty much anytime there is some separator, like the query string separator or the ampersand, just to keep things clean. So we'll separate it there. Separate it there, and keep in mind this is just one long string. I'm just moving it to separate lines using the plus operator for string concatenation. Okay. And we'll do that. And then ultimately I'm going to take this big string and I'm going to replace out the parts of it. So I'm going to go var base URL equals string.format, and then I'll pass in the URL, and then I'll pass in all of the replacement stuff. All right, so we'll get back to this in a minute. So for example, let's take I want to add something that we didn't add the first time here, or that wasn't in here. We're going to add something called a license, because I only want to search for certain types of files that match certain licenses. But now I'm just going to replace a bunch of this information, and we'll come back and do text later. We'll add some of these things back in. We're going to take them out for now. So we're going to replace, for example, latitude and longitude. And I'm going to hard code radius to 2 kilometers. Format is JSON, no JSON callback. And I don't think I need this API signature thingy, so we're going to get rid of that. All right, so that looks good. And so now we'll substitute in things like a license. So I'm going to need to create that at some point. And I'm going to need to create a Flickr API key. And then we're going to substitute in, we have this part, GPS chord center dot latitude, and then GPS chord center dot longitude. And and we'll build this over time. All right, so licenses. Let's go ahead and attack that. And let me open up another page here real quick. And so here we can learn about the different licenses that are available. There are all rights reserved all the way to US government work, no known copyright, and things of that nature. And so I want to target a certain number of licenses, and I don't want photos that'll pop up that are not in those licenses because I don't want to be restricted by those licenses. All right. And so what we'll do here is I'm just going to actually copy this for your reference. And I'm going to put that as a comment here, like right here, licenses. Paste that in. And then I'm going to actually paste in from 4 to 7. Do a multi-line comment. Great. So I'm going to build a string of licenses, and I'm going to replace the that with each of the comma that will separate the numbers, the licenses, the IDs, with a URL encoded value. So I'll just do something like this: string license equals we'll go 4, 5, 6, 7, and then license.replace. I'll get rid of all the commas, and I'll URL encode this by using the special code that represents a comma in a URL to C, like so. Okay, it's easy as that. The next thing I need is my API key, and you'll want to replace this with yours, and I can't emphasize that enough because it will not operate if you use mine, because I'm going to delete mine because it's not right for you to use my stuff. All right, get your own. All right. All right, here's the key. Copy that. Copy that. And we'll go string Flickr API key equals this. All right, and we've cleared up these references, so that should be good. Now we have the URL. Some of it is coming from the phone, and some of it we're kind of hard coding it in with constant values. And we can tack some more optional parameters onto the search a little bit later, but that should work for now. Now what we want to do is do string Flickr result equals. I'm going to use the client, so that HTTP client dot get string async, and then I'm going to pass in the base URL, like so. Now I'm going to get this little red squiggly line underneath it, and it says that this is an async method. Therefore, we need to use the await keyword here. And if we didn't already have it in place, we would need to add the async keyword here as well. But since we already had it once, we don't need to add it a second time. Again, we're going to devote a whole lesson to async, await, task of T, things of that nature, in a whole lesson, like 2 lessons from now. So just hold on. Just copy the code exactly the way you see it here for now, okay? And then finally what we want to do is, remember we added that result text block. I'm going to set its text attribute to this Flickr result. And so what all this is going to really accomplish is it's going to show me a little snippet of the JSON that we get back from a call to the web service. So now I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that everything works the way I have in my mind the very first time I try it. All right, and originally you see the latitude, longitude, and it should be replaced, yes, with JSON data. Awesome. So now let's do this. I'm going to set a breakpoint because I need this Flickr result string. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with it here in a minute. Okay, great. I'm going to hover my mouse cursor over. I'm going to go to the little mirror here, and I want to see it in a visualizer. And so I'm going to hit Control A on my keyboard to select all of the JSON and the little text visualizer, and hit Control C to copy it out to my clipboard. In fact, just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and paste the whole thing. You can see we get a lot of text back. All right. And I don't really care what this means at the moment. I will care about this very soon, possibly even before the end of this lesson. All right. But here's what I'm going to do with it. There's this nifty little tool that Clint found that will take JSON and will convert it to classes in C# that represent the structure of the JSON that you hold on your clipboard. So I'm going to put my mouse cursor there, and I'm going to hit Control V to paste all that JSON in, and I'm going to click Generate. And what it pops out is a bunch of classes, 3 classes. In fact, let's go ahead and copy these classes. So I hit the copy button. I'm going to hit Control C on my keyboard to copy this now. Get out of there. Close that. Close that. Stop that. I'm going to go to the very bottom here, and I'm going to stay inside the namespace, but outside of our main page class, and I'm going to hit Control V on my keyboard to paste in those 3 classes. So here we have it. At the very root, you have a root object, and this will represent the call you made to Flickr's API. In fact, I think what we want to do is change this to something a little more descriptive. We're going to call this Flickr data. All right, and Flickr data has a instance of photos, and photos represents the collection of photos that were returned from our search. So it does have a list of type photo among other information like the number of pages that, if you have multiple pages of values that are returned back from a search, you can specify a certain page of it and all that kind of business. We won't need that functionality per se. We're only trying to get at this list of photo, and the photo is defined here. And you can see by the public properties that every photo has an ID, it has an owner, it has this property called secret, which I think is probably a random set of numbers and letters that make it impossible for a hacker to just go through and guess the URL of every photo on the site and waste bandwidth and steal information from Flickr in mass. And so they have a little secret code there. And then every photo sits on a server inside of a farm. Every photo has a title, and it will tell us whether it's public, and I don't know what these other values mean, but we could look them up if we went to Flickr's API page. Is a friend, is family, I don't know what that means. All right. So at any rate, but there's enough information here returned back that we can construct a URL that would allow us to give it to the image control and say, here is a URL for an image. Try loading that into your image control. And that's what we're going to try and do here. Now, when we're working with JSON, remember what we needed to do to work with JSON from the previous project? We used Newtonsoft JSON library. So how do we add that from the package manager console? We type in install package newtonsoft.json. Now think about this. If I can remember a handful of packages and their names, or I write a little cheat sheet on a stick-it note, on a post-it for myself, then I can add functionality to any app that I'm working on really fast without having to go through the package manager dialog and all that business. So this can be a very quick way to add features to your app. And while I was talking, we've already added that to our app now. So back here in our update map method where we've been working, we have the result. We don't need this line of code anymore. What we need to do is parse through that JSON. So Flickr data equals JSON convert, and let's add that namespace as a using statement. Great. And we want to use deserialize object, passing in the type we want to deserialize into. So we're going to deserialize into the topmost object in that data structure that we got from JSON to, or C# to JSON, or it was JSON to C#, right? Here that we got a moment ago, right? From here. And then we're going to pass in the data, so Flickr result. And now we should have a populated set of classes that represent this object graph of photos. And so what we want to do is we're going to check this data. The data has this stat property on it. So Flickr data has a stat property, and if that property is okay, that means we successfully got data back. Cool. And so what we want to do is a for each through all that data. And we want to look at each photo. Actually, let me call this API data, and API data here, so I can keep the two different types of data straight in my mind. Much better. In API data dot photos dot photo. And what I want to do from this is I'm going to construct a URL, so to retrieve one photo, use this format. Here we go, http://. I'm going to give it a farm with a farm ID dot static flickr.com/ we'll give it a server ID. We have all this data. Then we're going to give it the ID of the photo, the little secret password for that photo, and then a size. And the sizes are represented with _n_b for the different file sizes. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. .jpeg. Cool. So let me actually borrow this now. We're going to go string photo URL equals, and we'll give it all that, but we're going to replace all these little thingies here with replacement numbers. So ID 1, ID is 2, the secret will be the 3, and then the size. For our purposes, we're only going to grab out the _n size for now. And then we'll do the replacement, so string.format, photo URL, and then we'll give it data dot, farm, data dot server, data dot ID. Now I'm going to have to give Clint the credit for figuring out most of this as usual. I've said that before. But he found somewhere, this is how you grab one image. And then it was just a matter of replacing in the little bits of image, the little bits of the URL that we have in our possession. And so that's how he went through it. He just spent time, looked at the documentation, read through it, and figured it out. And we're benefiting from it and kind of moving in fast forward as a result. But just keep in mind, you're just going to have to spend some time on the API documentation, no matter which web API you want to utilize, to learn how they require you interact with them in order to get data out. All right, so remember, the Flickr image control is just an image control in XAML for now, and eventually what we'll want to do is replace this Flickr image with a list of images. So the Flickr image.source, we'll set the source equal to we can't just give it the URL. What is the data type on this? It is of type image.source. I think what we can do is give it a bitmap image object. So let's create a new bitmap image, and that is in a whole different place. We're going to have to add a using statement to system.windows.media.imaging, right? And to create a new bitmap image, we need to give it a URI. We know how to create URIs. Man, we've created so many URIs in this series. So we create a new URI, and we'll just give it the base Flickr URL. I think that'll do it. Now, I only want one, so I'm just trying to grab one photo. So I want to break out of this for each loop. So break. And now for the moment of truth. Let's go ahead and save this and then run it. Cross our fingers. Okay, so far so good. Yes! Looks like we got an image looking up the North Shore of Chicago's Lake Michigan coast. We got it. So proof of concept, we can get this to work. We got it to work with one. We got a lot of code in place, but we can leverage going forward, and now we're just needing to make improvements. So to quickly recap, there are quite a few important takeaways from this lesson. We learned about the Flickr API, which contains hundreds of method calls, giving us access to practically every feature of Flickr so we can integrate it into our apps. We learned about getting an API key and how to call the search API and how to integrate it into our app. We learned a little bit more about JSON, how to use the JSON to C#.com website to create class definitions in C# that match the JSON data that we want to work with. We learned about Newtonsoft.JSON's ability to deserialize the JSON into instances of those classes so that we can work with them in C#. And we have a pretty cool proof of concept complete. And now we're going to turn around and start to massage this into what we originally had envisioned in our low-tech mockup, and we'll start that in the next lesson. We'll see you there. Thank you.